I have a confession to make. I've been questioning myself and thinking, am I being a little bit too skeptical about this whole notion of how AI will, justify all of these expenses and we're going to be walking into the bright future? And I'm just being very skeptical about this entire situation. So I went on a search of the killer application that will change our world. This is what I've arrived at. So essentially, what you see in front of you is kind of like my attempt to categorize all different types of AI usage, right? You have your generative, which is like everything around creation of something, right? Creation of media, like the music, videos, images, creating the code if you're a coder, right? Creating a text, so it's your ChatGPT functions, it's hey, draft an email for me and that kind of stuff. Predictive, so really thinking about the forecasting, right? The stock picking, the maintenance, say like, hey, which machine on our industrial floor will break first, right? Things of that nature. And the military application of just like predictive, again, a lot of their, agencies use it for the security measures. Then analytical from the perspective of detecting something, right? From it would say it's some sort of like fraud in cybersec and insurance, medical records, analyzing images for the breast cancer, things of that nature, FP&A, analyzing the financial performance, right? And then the autonomous kind of like function, robotics, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's those like Hiva robots driving around Amazon warehouses and kind of like moving the shelves around. Testing of different kind of like scripts, again, a lot of it related to manufacturing, kind of like creating the scenarios that you can run through and educate those models. And they're also used in the cars, right? So basically building up the autonomous cars. One thing you can very quickly realize if you've been like myself in the tech industry for a little while, only this is new. True kind of like AI things that popped off once OpenAI kind of like released ChatGPT 3, I think, right? Everything else has been around for a while. Predictive of the manufacturing errors. IBM is writing that way with Watson for the past like decade, probably. Stock picking, we had the Flash Boys, we had all sorts of, hyper trading in the hedge funds, military have been using it to analyze and kind of like predict who's going to be the next bad actor and things of that nature. Actuarials been using different types of analytical models to do their work. Same for the medical, same for cybersec. They've been using different ways to predict like zero-day attacks, things of that nature. FP&A, we've had FP&A tools. I've been in finance forever. So same for robotics again. Boston Robots, you have seen their work, Boston Robotics, right? Like you've seen those robots running around for at least another decade. Same for the cars and so on and so forth. So my whole point here is that as much as all of these companies applied AI label on themselves to justify a little bit higher valuation and stay in line, kind of like with the market, really truly new things that showed up were generative AI, right? And so from that perspective, like nothing jumped out at me as like, hey, this is going to be the thing that will change the future. Like one of those things I was curious about was the code, and I've spent past week at least watching different kind of like software engineers talk about AI and kind of like their application. What I realized there, it's very similar kind of like in media and everything else. It's like there's no magical create for me this app, click the button and the app is live, right? There's a lot of work that the professional software engineers have to do to make those things work. Architects have to get involved to make the systems speak to each other. So again, no magical silver bullet, amazing application. And they got me thinking, okay, but then why am I skeptical? Right? I've been hyper analyzing myself. It's like, okay, but like, am I not seeing things or am I like seeing too much into looking too much into this? And I kind of like thought of this visual, right? Is because all of these things, right? So your forecasting, your analytical, so predictive analytical autonomous functions, right? All of them have been around. That's kind of like my point of this visual. And they've been kind of like your boring enterprise use cases. A lot of you, if you haven't been in the world of like corporate enterprise, if you haven't been in SaaS, you might have not even known about half of these things, right? But like we stay on top of it because that's something, again, you look around, I've worked at different companies, they've done different parts of these things. And so boring, but made money. A lot of Fortune 500 companies, like billion-dollar companies, make a lot of money, a lot of good money, providing those services, right? And then generative showed up, and this jump is essentially my kind of like visualization of the perception. And then the perception kind of like, oh my god, like I can click write the text, create for me the image of the Pikachu sitting together with Mario and smoking a blunt. How can I do this? This is amazing. And all of a sudden, everyone blew up, including myself. Like, I got super excited. I was like, hey, this actually looks like a ton of fun, especially for someone who's like drawing skills stop evolving when I was 5 years old at the stick figures. Like, that's the peak of my drawing skills. For me, that was awesome. I was like, hey, this is great. And for a lot of other people, like all of these generative use cases kind of like got everyone excited. And so with that, what I'm trying to show is say like the spending followed, because people saw this perception and they kind of like imagine, hey, this trend line is going to keep going up. It's going to get more and more exciting. Let me just move it over here so it's a little bit easier to see. Like, it's going to get better and better, so we need to go pump the money. And valuations start popping up, the stock market start responding. And I'll leave, maybe one day I'll make a video about my opinion of the public markets. But that was right around the time where a lot of companies just stopped caring about fundamentals, right? Like the fundamentals in the stock trading is that you look at the company's profit and the revenue and the market size, and you say, hey, they realistically can take over 20% of this market. And at this particular profitability, assuming some improvements, they're going to get this much profit. So it's going to take them 2 years, and I'm going to price it into my model. And I'm going to predict that in 2 years, this company will be making this much money. That will justify this valuation because we're going to evaluate it at like X3, X4, X10 on each dollar that they make in profit. Here's my model. This is your fundamental analysis, right? You analyze fundamentals of the company's performance. You make a few assumptions. You justify valuation. Now it's all over the place. Now it's a vibe. It's all in the vibe. It's like, hey, are we considering this to be a promising company? Awesome. 10x valuation, 20x valuation. Are they making any profit? Who cares? It's going to be fine. They're going to figure it out. That's how we work right now. Like Tesla, if you look at the fundamentals, on a good day, it's like $100 to $200 billion company. And it's like 1.5 trillion right now, right? Or I think something like this. It's ridiculous. Like, don't get me started there. But this is essentially what started to follow. Kind of like this vibe-based investment followed all these AI investments. And essentially people start saying like, hey, generative is going to be great and it's going to drive this line. So we're going to spend up to that amount. And now what happens is that you have ROI expectations associated with it, right? And the reason the stick is that damn high is because ROI expectations for especially venture capital, right, and a lot of like institutional investors is not you're going to return to me 5% like a CD in a bank, right, or something. 5% is a lot actually for CD. It's like 4%, 3% right now. They expect X multiples on the money that they've invested with you. And so now you can imagine all of these companies essentially saying like, yeah, we spend these like whatever $600 billion right now. We expect to see this amount of return, right? And you have this massive gap of like question mark, right? It's like, I think it was it Office? It's like start the business, question mark, profit. This is it. This is the equivalent of that in the current AI environment. And essentially, this is where I started realizing, I was like, no, it's actually, I convinced myself. I was like, I'm not that wrong in terms of like, I think that there was a lot of hype from the perception, but then if you look back at some of these features, there's not enough here right now to justify being able to close this gap between the amount of money we spend, the perception, and the ROI that everyone expects on all the money that has been spent so far. And so being kind of like reasonable, you might ask, okay, but Tahir, why? Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Why all this spending? How are they going to reach it? And the best example, I think, the best phrase that actually, to be honest, I think is very factual is what Mark Zuckerberg said, right? He said that, hey, I'm okay with spending several $100 billion on the path towards potentially acquiring this part of the market, right? Because he and many of us have seen it back in like whatever it would be, early 2000s when Google figured out search. Google was never the first or the only search engine, right? Like they figured the model out. They were not the first or the only advertising provider. They figured it out. They were not the first or the only in the video market. They've acquired YouTube. They figured it out. And so once they start slowly doing those things, everyone realized like, crap, if you figured out this secret to the market, like Amazon and the shopping, right? You can corner this entire market and you can set your fortunes for the next decade or two. And so for a lot of these companies, when they think back to kind of like this gap, what they're realizing is that, hey, yes, we're going to spend so much, but I'd rather spend and have a chance to be at the table to play this game versus not spending at all and not having a place on this. The only exclusion, actually, which is very interesting, and I'm curious how it's going to pan out, is Apple. If you realize, and Apple has almost like none of this going on, right? Like to the point where they recently announced that and they're going to be partnering with Google Gemini as kind of like their AI provider for Siri and all the search functions, right? So Apple is the only ones who are like not spending these crazy amounts of money on AI, which I think in hindsight might turn out to be one of the best decisions in that company's, history since rehiring Steve Jobs and, releasing iPhone. So that's kind of like where it's heading. And then coming back to kind of like this visual and realizing like there are expectations. I'm actually not the only one who's been doing this calculation, and Bain and company, right? Who, again, we have our opinions on Bain, but ultimately they do a lot of good research, and I try to read their stuff whenever it hits my inbox. Their prediction is that we need close to $2 trillion in revenue to justify all this spending right now, which is kind of ridiculous. And even if you go and look, some other estimates make it closer to $1 billion. I was curious, like, what is the size of the SaaS spending today, right? And again, you can find different, kind of like research materials. One here says it's 300 billion. The other one kind of like puts it, a little bit older report, puts it closer to 400 billion. And the forecast that in the next 6 years, it's going to reach 1.23 trillion. So if you follow this logic, you're essentially saying that all these AI companies have to replace all of the other SaaS spend, basically take it completely over to justify this. And I remind you, today, this whatever 300-400 billion SaaS spend is composed of a bunch of companies that do a lot of other things, and many of the use cases can benefit from the AI features, right? Kind of like to my point, but it's not really AI features. It's more like predictive modeling, things that we're already doing. So it's nothing new. So they already have it. So what you're basically saying, you either need to create a killer application to replace those use cases and be so good that people are going to be like, cancel these invoices, I want to pay for this. Or you're going to create new incremental spend. And then if you're creating new incremental spend, who is paying for it? Because this is spending by your Fortune like 500 companies. These are the richest companies in the world. Like, this is already all the money they have potentially. So you can expect them to cut down their profits, but if they cut down their profits, they essentially will start tanking in price and people start getting fired in those companies. And that's not going to lead anywhere good. And a lot of those companies, by the way, they have the investment funds and they invest in these AI companies, which is a whole other story we're going to reach now. So you kind of start to realize like not only they don't have killer applications right now, the expectations are super high. They need to make a lot of money. They also kind of like shooting themselves in the foot with all the AI perception, right? Because I feel like the market gets so hot and everyone got so excited and everyone wants to talk about AI that they're forgetting about regular people, right? And I made kind of like most of the point of my prior video was specifically on this, but I just want to tie it back together and say, imagine that you're trying to reach this already very unlikely reachable heights when it comes to revenue, and people hate you. And you're talking about the layoffs, although again, I call BS on half of these layoffs, on majority actually, I think of these layoffs are done because of the financial performance of the companies rather than AI, but AI is a sexier way of saying why you laid off people. But then you also have, things like, again, there's a lot of visuals. Yeah, I think I extracted one visual. Your GPU prices going up, and Nvidia is like making so much money on the enterprise GPUs for all these data centers that they barely even want to release. They're literally right now like trying to re-release all the versions of the GPUs because they just don't want to bother. They don't want to care. They want to use all those latest dies for all the sexy AI stuff and all types of GPUs. They want to sell it basically to us as consumers. Be like, you just take the crumbs off my table and move away from the king's table, right? Kind of situation. RAM is going through the same exact scenario right now because they all of a sudden Altman decided to blow up the market and buy like 40% of the 2026 stock of RAM, and everyone went crazy and started buying them up. And you might say, hey, who cares? I don't build PCs. Why would I care about GPUs? Why would I care about RAM? Guess what? Your phones, your laptops, some cases your toasters, your fridges, your TVs, all of them have RAM in them. So we currently not seeing it yet, but you're going to see potential spike in prices for those, depending on, again, how much they're using it. But ultimately, RAM is like 3x, 4x the price right now. It's a small component, so it's not like your TV will double in price, but you're probably going to see a few $100 extra that you need to pay for it. And I don't know why it's trying to do this. You also then hear about the stories like, oh, maybe we'll need a bailout because OpenAI, honestly, that's going to be one of my stories, I think, of this year. If they make it out of 2026, it's going to be a surprising move, in my opinion, because they're now doing ad insertions because that's how desperate they are. And Altman used to make fun of anyone who's like, yeah, if you go to the ad space, you're really desperate and hungry for money. Guess what? Welcome to the club now. So you have negative perception. People are really not excited about seeing you entering the space, whether it's a creative space now, whether it's video games. You see video game pub, like whatever, Clarobscure Expedition 33 got like banned from one of the indie awards because they had like one generative image. Larian Studios were like the darlings of the gaming world after the Baldur's Gate 3 release. All of a sudden we're in the hot waters because they just mentioned that somehow they just slightly use AI tools, and they had to come back to the market and announce that they're prohibiting AI usage for that specific game that they're working on right now, Divinity. It's like one after the other you see companies. I was even at the event with the creatives, and you can hear a pin drop in the room whenever the company was talking about AI because people just didn't care. They had this kind of negative perception. So where do I think this is all going? In my opinion, the way this is going to, I think, evolve is that the market, there will be a correction, right? I don't know if it's going to be a bubble burst, a crash, whatever you will call it. There's definitely going to be a correction because you saw that graph, you saw kind of like visualization, you saw some of the metrics, right, in terms of like how much money needs to be made. Like very quickly we'll realize either, and I think it's going to be cascading set of events. You're going to see data centers not going live because infrastructure is not there. You will see a lot of these companies that spend billions and billions of dollars on the GPUs to build those data centers realize they cannot even turn them on online. And the fact that there's not enough funding now coming from other sources, that they'll start slowing down their investments. Microsoft was already announcing that they're slowing down their expectations for the Copilot because no one is using it. You will see that slowly. And then there's like a phrase that I like. It's like slowly that everyone at once. You're going to see those slow kind of like creeping up news of like this company doing this company not doing this company retiring this. But then it's going to be all at once. Everyone's going to realize like, you know what? We overheated the market. Our bad. Let's come back to our boring, those other use cases that I showed from the enterprise and slowly walk back towards AI. So like that correction, and funny enough, something like OpenAI laying people off, or OpenAI being in a situation where they have to ask for the bailout and people realizing like, hey, this is the biggest company in this space with the most advanced features and they cannot make money on this. So like what are the chances do we have? And you're going to see that correction happening, right? Potentially billions, hundreds of billions of dollars wiped and out of the stock market. And then it's not going to go away. It's not going to disappear. All I really think, because a decade ago, as I've mentioned, 75% of these features have been around. People have been using them. Large, LLMs, large learning models, they were out there already before, and they're going to continue. Will people use AI label? Will they not use AI label? Who cares? Ultimately, predictive models have been here for the decade. They will be here 2 decades from now, and they're just going to get better. And those features going to get better. And through the enterprise, I think more and more it's going to be adopted throughout day-to-day life. And it's just going to be like internet, right? Like internet used to be a very narrow use case for educational, establishments. I think MIT, right, was one of the first educational facilities that adopted it. Slowly now we have it everywhere. And we cannot imagine our life without it, but we're also not celebrating as much because it's internet. Like everyone has it. It's going to be very similar. It's like, yeah, I have a chat and I can ask it some things, or like, hey, yeah, I can flip the switch over here and have things happening around my house because there's a script going on and it takes care of everything, right? Like things will be there. It's just going to be less exciting, less sexy at first, and then eventually there's going to be some interesting maybe development or some new transformers built, and there's going to be some new technological advancement that's going to push it enough and create enough of that hype gap. And again, I was going to get excited, and there's going to be expectation. It's going to be another cycle. We're going to go through it again. People are going to be claiming, no, it's not a cycle. There's not going to be a correction, and we're going to go through the entire journey again for a couple of years until the next reset. Like, that's how this market works. People get excited and they're rewarded upon trying to predict the future performance. As I mentioned, and based on Mark Zuckerberg, which again, have my criticism of the guy, but he's correct there. There's going to be plenty of companies who will say, I'd rather misspend money than not have a seat at that table if the game is happening, right? So is there a killer feature right now, which was the beginning of my journey for this video? No, I didn't see any. And I went deep enough with a lot of these use cases. And there's half, as I said, not half, 75% of them or so, all the same stuff that've been around. And for all the interesting ones, they're okay. They're interesting. You still have to do a lot of work to make them actually work. So we will see how fast and how quickly some of those things will evolve through 2026. But I do think we're going to see the correction this year. Like, if somehow people manage to exit 2026 without a correction, that's going to be a massive accomplishment on the PR of these companies, on the hopium and the copium that all the investors going to be drinking and inhaling. It's going to be a massive achievement by all of them if they make it out of 2026 without the correction and somehow punt it to 2027. So, like, this is going to happen. The only person I was going to give kudos to is my guy, Alex Karp. If you never heard about him, you probably saw his face. He's an odd fellow. Dude is smart in the sense that he's been selling Palantir. So he's CEO and co-founder of Palantir. You've heard of them. They do a lot of AI stuff for the military, especially in the United States, but now also around the world. He's been dumping his shares left, right, and center. There's actually, like, this is, I think it's November 25. Yeah, it was November 2025 article. And so he sold last year, right? Like hundreds of millions of dollars of stock. Actually, I found this article from last year that actually back in 2024, he sold like 2 billion worth of stock, and he's been selling ever since. So my man has realized, I think, that he's like, hey, we're very frothy. And I'm going to take advantage of this. And I'm going to dump my shares. And by the way, they all say it's like, oh, it was pre-scheduled. It was pre-scheduled sale, nothing to see here. But I think he's just smart enough. He realizes like, hey, I'm lucky enough to be in this position to have access to this stock. And the market is so overvalued right now. I need to exit it stat. And so, smart move. If I would be in his position, I would be doing the same thing, just because once everything is reset, I'll still have my billions of cash in the bank account, right? So, it's interesting times. I genuinely tried to see. I was like, hey, maybe I just, coding was my example. I was like, maybe I don't see something. Like, I'm not hands on the keyboards coding every day. This is where the killer feature is, right? And medical is out there as well, from research perspective, unfolding the proteins and things of that nature. There's some interesting developments over there, but there's also they're not really making any money right now, or like some money, but it's nothing that, you're going to completely, it's going to positively, I think, affect the development of the medical sphere, but it's not carrying hundreds of billions of dollars of extra new revenue. So we will see how 2026 evolves. But I went on a journey. I tried to be a good boy. I was like, I'll do my best. I'll have my open mind. I'll try to find something to justify and realize that technology is great. It's still going to be there when the reset happens. We're still going to use it. It's going to get better over time, but that line, that gap that I showed, I don't think they're covering it anytime soon. I'll see you next Saturday. Peace.